While much of the financial world is distracted by the holiday break, something important is starting to shift in the plumbing of the global economy. For the last 6 months, the focus has been on interest rate cuts and the promise of a soft landing. On the surface, that sounds reassuring. But if you look beneath the headlines, at things like repo markets and bank reserves, a very different picture begins to emerge. What we're seeing isn't just a fluctuation in interest rates, it's a shift in liquidity, the flow of money that allows the system to function day to day. It isn't dramatic yet, and it certainly isn't being discussed in the mainstream, but it matters, particularly as we move towards 2026. In this video, I want to walk through what isn't making the front pages, and why some of the assumptions people are still relying on may no longer be as solid as they appear. Welcome to Money and Power. If you value a calm, evidence-based look at how money, policy and power actually interact, please take a moment to like the video. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. It helps this analysis reach people who are looking for something a little more grounded than the daily headlines. Now, we're being told fairly consistently that inflation is under control and that central banks have successfully engineered a soft landing. Markets seem comfortable with that idea. Equity prices reflect it. Volatility is subdued. Confidence, at least on the surface, appears to be holding. The problem is that the soft landing narrative focuses almost entirely on the price of money, interest rates, and largely ignores the availability of money. Those two things are not the same. Liquidity isn't about what money costs. It's about whether it's actually there when it's needed. Over the last year, something subtle but important has been happening. Even as rates have stabilized and, in some cases, begun to edge lower, the level of reserves sitting within the banking system has started to contract. This is the delayed effect of years of quantitative tightening finally working its way through the system's plumbing. When reserves shrink, banks don't suddenly stop operating. There's no alarm bell, no immediate crisis. But what happens instead is a gradual change in behavior. Lending standards tighten, risk tolerance narrows, institutions become more selective about where capital flows. On the surface, everything still looks normal. The lights are on, but behind the scenes, the voltage is lower. That matters because modern financial systems rely heavily on confidence and continuity. They assume that liquidity will always be available somewhere, even if conditions become strained. And that brings us to the repo market. The repo market is where banks and large institutions borrow cash overnight using high-quality collateral, usually government bonds. It's one of the core mechanisms that keep the financial system functioning smoothly. In a healthy system, repo markets are dull, rates are stable, nobody pays much attention. But recently, we've seen intermittent spikes. Brief moments where the cost of borrowing overnight jumps sharply. These episodes don't last long, and they're often dealt with quickly, but their very existence is telling. They suggest that the margin for error is shrinking. When repo rates spike, it's usually because there's less spare liquidity sloshing around. The cushion that absorbs stress is thinner than it used to be. This becomes more significant when you look ahead to the next couple of years. Governments in the United States and Europe are facing record financing needs. Deficits remain large. Debt issuance continues to rise. Trillions in new bonds will need to be absorbed by the system. Traditionally, banks and large institutions play a key role in that process. But if reserves are already constrained, and if funding markets are already showing signs of friction, the question becomes more uncomfortable. Who absorbs that debt without something else giving way? This is where the idea of a liquidity trap starts to enter the conversation, not in the academic sense, but in a practical one. A system can look stable while becoming increasingly brittle. It can function normally right up until the moment it doesn't. That's why I keep coming back to 2026. It's not a prediction, it's a convergence point. Over the next year or two, several pressures begin to overlap. Large amounts of corporate debt taken out during the ultra-low rate period of 2020 and 2021 will need to be refinanced. Fiscal policies are set to change as major tax measures expire or are renegotiated. Central banks themselves are reassessing how actively they manage their balance sheets. Taken individually, none of these is catastrophic. Taken together, they mark a transition. We're moving from an era of abundant liquidity to one where liquidity is more selective, more conditional, and more politically influenced. In the old environment, standing still felt safe. You could hold cash. You could hold broad markets. The rising tide of liquidity lifted almost everything. In the environment we're moving into, standing still carries more risk than people realize. Not because markets must fall, but because the system has less spare capacity to absorb shocks. When liquidity is plentiful, small problems stay small. When liquidity tightens, the same problems can have much larger effects. That's what makes this period different. What I'm describing isn't a crash in the traditional sense. It's a repricing. It's a gradual shift in where power sits within the system, away from assumptions that worked in a liquidity-rich world and toward assets and structures that can cope with scarcity and constraint. Over the next 2 days, I want to explore this further. Tomorrow we'll look specifically at the role of cash in this environment and whether it offers the safety many people assume that it does. And on Monday, we'll talk about gold and silver, not as trades or forecasts, but as signals of how the system itself is adjusting to these pressures. Consistency matters. I said I'd stick to the Saturday, Sunday and Monday rhythm even over the holidays, and I intend to keep that promise. Hopefully you will like this video enough to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. Not to forget pressing the bell notification sign so that you'll be notified of when future videos are published. Finally, please comment below. Let me know what you think not only of this video, but the subjects we are now covering, and those sorts of subjects you would like us to specifically cover in the future. Each of your comments are read, and I will do my utmost to answer as many as I possibly can. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.